So hello everyone, and welcome to Kuma International Architecture Month. My name is Claudia, and I'm the director of Kuma International. And my duty as a director tonight is to welcome you, of course, and letting people in the meeting room. But also I have to thank our donors and our partners for supporting the initiative. And we are also almost always, of course, grateful and thankful to them. But this year, as you know, it's a very special year and difficult circumstances for everyone. So we are really grateful that they were showing their support to the initiative. And first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Nicola Minasi, the Italian ambassador in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Open Society Fund, 7 Academy, the Association of Architects in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is actually hosting us tonight at the headquarters in Sarajevo, International Birch University, BuyBook, and Ideologia. And also, of course, I would like to thank our first guest, Armina Pilav. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and welcome. And of course, also I would like to thank my colleague and friend, Lejla. Lejla is program coordinator for the Architecture Month. She was also the program coordinator last year for the Architecture Week. So thank you so much, Lejla, as well. And I'll leave you the floor. And thanks to all of you for joining us. And I hope you will enjoy the talk tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you to everybody who has joined the program tonight. As Claudia said, that this is officially our second architecture program. Last year, we ran an architecture week, and it was entitled Unfolding Sarajevo. And the idea was to kind of, through different historical periods, have an architectural discourse on Sarajevo's history, but also on its contemporary condition and kind of speculate on its future. It was a very, let's say, interesting and successful week in many ways. As a result, we have also published our first publication that's also entitled Unfolding Sarajevo. You can find this in BuyBook. It's a bit of a plug-in here. So if you're interested, you could look it up in BuyBook. And for this Architecture Month, obviously, the circumstances have changed a little bit, as we know, due to the pandemic, and as such, we're going online, and we'll be hosting a whole month of architecture. So you can catch all the lectures on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 o'clock our time, which is Eastern Central Time. Yes. And so we'll be exploring the theme of architecture and resilience, which seems an appropriate theme given the current circumstances. And we have kind of subdivided into 4 different topics. So tonight, Armina Pilav will be our first speaker, and she will be exploring let's say, the theme of building resilience under destruction. Her talk is entitled, well, she will tell you what her talk is entitled, so maybe I'll just go quickly through the other guests and I'll come back to Armina. After Armina on Thursday, we have Paul Law. He's a photographer, and he was in Sarajevo during the siege. So he'll tell us a little bit more about architecture under the siege, kind of from a photographical point of view. And then in the second week, we're going to talk about memory and resilience. We will have Anna Kukic and Sabina Tanovic joining us. For the third week, we'll be looking at resilience as culture. So we actually have Azra Akshamia joining us on Tuesday of that week. And on Thursday, we will have Amra Haji Muhammadovic. And then we'll wrap up the month last week with a topic called Divisions and Resilience. And for that week, we will have Igor Kovac and Nasiha Pozder. So as you can see, we have kind of a very exciting lineup for everybody, and we do hope that you can join us for as many lectures as possible. I want to especially thank my students. I know many of you are joining tonight, so I hope to see you for every lecture. So now coming back to Armina. So she's the one to break the ice. So thank you so much for being the first guest tonight. She was also with us last year for our first edition. So thank you, Armina. Armina is a feminist, architect, researcher, lecturer at the Department of Landscape at University of Sheffield. and she's also she received the Marie Curie Individual Fellowship and was at Technical University of Delft from 2016 until 2018, working on a project entitled On War Space. There's much more to say about Armina and her background, but I will kind of just stop briefly here. Armina, please do add something.
Don't worry, it's okay.
She's working on many different things, so maybe she will also touch upon them tonight. So Armina, we're so happy that you have been able to join us. If there are any questions from the audience, I would ask the audience to type your questions either during the lecture or after the lecture, and then we will take some time to have a discussion with Armina after she delivers her lecture. So Armina, I leave you the floor, and I'm looking forward to your lecture tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks. So I will share my screen for the beginning, and then I will start. Good evening, everyone. I apologize again for these technical problems. First time it happened in this, I don't know how many months I'm working online, but it happens. So I'm really excited to share my time and ideas with also other colleagues on the list. And thank you, Claudia and Lejla, for inviting me. And I'm also kind of happy to remind myself on the first research team that I started actually to explore when I was first year of my PhD in Venice in 2014. And I have to say that I'm still interested in architecture and resilience, but maybe from the citizens' perspectives who lived or are living in the war, or in any case related to the war conflicts, rather than instrumental arrangements that state of emergency, that our governments are putting in place whenever there is a state of emergency in academian terms. What could be in practical terms translated into state of control, let's say. So when I was exchanging emails with Lejla, she proposed the title for my lecture, Before the War, War After the War, Urban Imaginaries for Urban Resilience, and it's the title of the paper that I published in 2011 with the Journal of Disaster Risk Science. But then I felt like that it's a bit old work, let's say, and that it's a bit limiting to also show some other things that I was researching after this article. So relating to that, I could reassume the talk under the title Transitional Archives of War, Survival and Resilience in Sarajevo between 1992 and 1996. And now we can go to slide 2. I can do this. You can change, Claudia. Yeah. So I think that the question of archiving, what you will see through the presentation, is also important as the word resilience or survival. And researching and thinking the war in Bosnia, you can go to 3. And more precisely in Sarajevo is somehow relating our disciplinary discourses, planning, designing, and thinking of the city and everyday life during the last 60, I would say, or more years. 4. So we know that it takes time to build cities, and it takes no time to destroy them, as we could experience or learn from the Sarajevo case and many other war contexts around the world at the moment. And when I started to study resilient practices during the war in Sarajevo, I also did extensive research, starting with questions as if planning of any city could include the scenarios or plans in case of the war destruction. And secondly, I was very busy with the different definitions of resilience, questions how to become resilient city, looking at UN documents, for example, policies of UK or United States, that other researchers were also mentioning in their texts. So I will expose one, slide 5. The United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction definition of resilience is the ability of a system, community, or society exposed to hazards to resist, absorb, accommodate to, and recover from the effects of hazard in timely and efficient manner, including through the preservation and restoration of its essential basic structures and functions. Explanation of resilience by UK government derives from a national policy perspective, that is ability of the country to detect, to prevent, and respond with speed and certainty to major emergencies, including terrorist attacks. And this work also relies on the American model, like UK kind of used this American model of resilience at the urban level that has been adopted by the United States as a national policy since 2003. about the protection of lifelines. It means system of roads, utilities, and other support facilities designed to continue their functioning during natural disaster or terrorist attack. They always mention terrorist attacks, not really wars. And what is common in all these transnational ideas of resilience, that they all contain words as capacity, adjust, adapt, recovery, and hazards or threats. And of course, lifelines, that is very, very popular term in studies on urban resilience. And I have to know that after September 11, when the Twin Towers in New York were destroyed, the need for urban resilience in cities against human threats and against terrorism specifically became really an acute concern. So 6, beside looking at all different texts on resilience, I was also trying to learn how to observe and think about contemporary wars that are wars in the city, where people are integral part of it, as was during the Sarajevo siege. And Gregory John Ashford, in his book War and the City, published in 1991, writes about the difficulties people have in accepting the city as a conflict-laden environment. And this reluctance to envisage long-term violent conflict as part of urban life calls into question whether urbanism and planning strategies have sufficient tools to prepare cities for the risk and conflicts of war and subsequent post-war recovery conditions. 7. So having in mind Ashford's book, War in the City, and quote I just shared, I started to consult several planning documents for Sarajevo made in the 70s and the program of construction and urban development of Sarajevo for the period 1971-1985. For the first time, there was a chapter related to the development of the city in terms of national defense and protection from natural hazards. So this chapter, 8, was written by 3 authors, Bokan Stajovic and Bemić. I don't have names, I apologize for that, because my books are in Sheffield and I'm in Brač. So, and this I took from the article that I mentioned before. So they somehow did made form of guidelines containing urban analysis and several recommendations that I will list in my presentation, but I will not read them all because this is long. I will just maybe note a few of them that were maybe most interesting for me. But they write that planning of the roads in the city should be in a way that connect it with hinterland for efficient evacuation of citizens and material goods in case of war or natural disaster. So this is relating to Sarajevo, what actually during the war did not happen, and you will see why. Then also they recommend these dual purpose facilities, like the public buildings or other buildings can serve as shelters, but also to their later on function. They also mention Sarajevo Airport, located in Dobrnja, next to Dobrnja neighborhood. It's kind of danger for the city. 9. Also, they identify Baš Čaršija and Marin Dvor that are very densely populated as very vulnerable areas in case of some risk. And also that longitudinal spatial development of the city is problematic and kind of difficult to evacuate people from the city. Shelter space was calculated like 1.15 square meters per person. And also it was mentioned that each citizen should be guaranteed 1 shelter space at home and at work. So it means 2 in case you are doing some work, and many people did work during the war. Next one. So I would now move from the recommendations to analysis of special practices of citizens during the war in Sarajevo between 1992 1996, that this shifting between the resilient city to resilient subjects, the term that I borrowed from Elke Krasny and Majke Schalk. Elke is curator and Majke is architect, who wrote the text based on their curatorial practice, architecture and feminist theory, entitled Resilient Subjects on Building Imaginary Communities. They did study other examples more related to participatory art practices as walking or protesting or different kind of things. But somehow their project resonates, their research resonates with what I'm trying to explain in this lecture. And they say that in different ways, the examples illustrate the transformation of individuals and groups and the emergence of new subjectivities through the process of moving from singular to common practices, as well as the appropriation of public and hegemonic space that are given new meaning. And you will see how these spaces change and what are these meanings actually. So I explore resilient city through transformations of the spaces for everyday life with aim to transform military destruction of the city, infrastructures, occupation, control of urban rural landscapes and citizens' domestic spaces with non-violent practices. What I define unwar practices, like practices of undoing war. And these non-violent practices are made by resilient subjects that are forming through bodily adaptations and human relations. So just a second. Within spaces of war, and new codes of knowledge formed through the civilian non-military reactions. And these relations are made through, for example, material mediation. So it's between military and civilian worlds, rescaling the city. Then survival body, self-made infrastructures and objects made from already existing objects and for temporary use. And then skills of darkness that contain both material forms and forms of spatial imagination in this case. Slide, okay, 12. So the main force in the war city is an effort to create life out of debris and to survive, including growing up, as you can read on this film, still from the film directed by Pierre Žalica. So where joyous and horrible it is to live there, as this boy in the film is singing, actually. 13. And on the following slides, I will show spatial transitions of Sarajevo into the war context between 1992 and 1996. And I think it would be fair to start from resilient subjects of Sarajevo and how this survival body did actually developed during the war. I will quote Paul Virilio. It's one of my favorite French philosophers of aesthetics, and he's also urbanist and writing a lot on technology and war machines and how these spaces are actually formed. And he says that bodies are no longer the ultimate matter, our skin, the final frontier, our consciousness, the training ground for a world being turned on its head. What is also happening now, I would say, and this was published in 1996. So the new limits are now to be found beyond in otherwise transcendental realms. So next. Okay, now we are in Sarajevo, 1992. And according to different resources, proclamation of independence of the Bosnia and Herzegovina on the 1st of March in 1992 from Yugoslavian Federation, that was a result of citizen referendum, since then has been considered as a reason for different armed and non-armed incidents in the city. And during the same month, as well as the introduction to the war in Sarajevo, because in other parts of Bosnia, war did start a bit earlier, let's say, 15. So citizens gathered in March and April to protest in a very enthusiastic and kind of revolutionary atmosphere on the streets of the city or occupying the parliament, 16. Somehow the overall atmosphere was related to the idea that we could stop war with our bodies. Then 17. But during the April demonstration that lasted 3 days, Serbian snipers attacked the people, and this is actually the moment when citizens learn that war is really starting in Sarajevo, 18. So these two photos are the same location that I showed in the beginning, and people first were standing and kind of protesting, and then just 1 month later they had to crawl their bodies and kind of respond to sniper attacks in a different way, behaving completely differently on the street. And in my view, this is also the moment when the individual and collective survival body was starting to develop. So 19. And back to material mediation between military and civilian worlds, rescaling of the city, I want to share with you the fragment of our common past and start to compare these military and civilian entanglements from the Olympic map that you can see. And this is the map where you can also see how natural landscape helped in developing the theater of war in Sarajevo, and how kind of this longitudinal orientation of the city that I already mentioned. Then 20. Then overdrawn Olympic map during the siege. So as you can see that the territory really rescaled. And finally 21. And then also the illustration done by Fama Collective of Sarajevo Survival Guide. And according to their guide, and represented on this map, on the surrounding hills and mountains around the city, following the natural landscape, was positioned numerous tanks, mortars, and other small arms. Also, some parts of the neighborhood were divided into like Dog and Grbavica. So the war was happening really inside and between the buildings in the city, or the opposite riverside banks, as the case of Grbavica. Then 22. And bombing was staged from all the mountainous perimeters, while any unprotected main city boulevards, like intersections that you can see these red dots on the map, and other open spaces were under constant threat of sniper shooting, and sniper was in total control of the public space, what is actually the spatial artifact of Foucauldian idea of panopticon, of surveillance, to which I could add the physical exercising of another type of power by humans to kill the machine with the machine another human, so sniper. 23. So in this specific slide, I want to show you how close attack tanks or any kind of weapons was to Sarajevo. You could really see like in the people's homes. And this is the famous film still from the film Serbian Epics by Pavel Pavlikovsky that you can find on his website. It's available to see it online. It lasts like 30 minutes. It's really short, but it's very, very well made. And on this picture, you can see on this film still you can see Karadzic and Limonov, Russian poet, talking about like occupation of the city and their relationship to the city, and also Limonov in that specific occasion also shoot himself. 24. So as a response to the Serbian occupation, the wartime government of Bosnia and Herzegovina started to organize defense forces, while everyday civilian life changed dramatically. And this also involved adapting to the new geographies of war. And in these locations, like spatial and bodily relations are mediated through two elements. So one side, you can see weaponry, so military vehicles, artillery, snipers, and the availability of raw materials, land and trees, other people, as well as the all available apparently non-functional objects to ruined buildings or debris to kind of make life possible. 25. And destructive military operations and the civilian reaction to them through the process of normalization into everyday life physically transformed the city, as you can see on these photos. So the landscape, public transport, building exteriors and interiors. And 26. And this is the moment where we come to this idea of architectural mediation in the war that actually was proposed by Savahuddin Špilja and Borislav Čurić in their text published in Marh magazine in 1993. And they write that architecture, whatever it may be, good or bad, expensive or cheap, representative or not, is material medium which most directly, with exception of human victims, and most convincingly reflects terrible war destruction consequences. 27. So war introduced new elements: barricades, sandbags, semi-underground trenches for citizens to walk, urban gardens. 28. And sniper protection walls. 29. Now 30. So everyday life was limited to a network of underground, semi-underground, and above-ground urban spaces. People's movements were reduced to a minimum, and even then were only conducted to such like essential needs to acquire the food or water. Some people, depends which age group you were belonging, and also like what was your role in that time in the city. What if you were working, then you would move, of course. But actually, the life was moving completely in more and more to the underground city. So utility infrastructures, lifelines that we mentioned also at the beginning of war were completely destroyed, like water, electricity, and gas. So the normal functions of the city were interrupted from the very beginning. And being without electricity and gas for heating became the norm in the city, and only the light of shell bursts, tracer bullets, and the fires that broke out in damaged buildings disrupted the presence of eternal darkness in the night time. And these are the photos that actually show this burning buildings. 32. And everyone knew that, as you can see, there were different reports that in Sarajevo, through the siege, the destruction of electric, gas, phone line, and water facilities has been used as a weapon against the inhabitants of the city. 33. Elektroprivreda building, electric power station, designed by Ivan Strauss, was also destroyed and was burning, but only one room, the control room, actually was placed that remained. This is the room from where you sent the electricity to the city. And in that time, it was altered. There were some parts of the city that could still function, or were repaired to functions like for hospitals, for public kitchens, or war presidency. And when I was having an interview with Ivan Strauss, he told me that he actually designed the control room as an atomic shelter. So I was telling as reaction to cut off the electricity, so people kind of self-made water mills to produce electricity, like a small kind of electricity power station. Many public institutions, such as hospitals, use diesel power generators, and Sarajevo, according to FAMA Survival Guide, had 1,800 electricity transformer stations during the war. More than half were out of use or destroyed. But inhabitants still had use of it by taking the oil from transformer station to replace like a car fuel. Then 36. So from now, like from the city scale, I would like to pass to the domestic scale of war and to show like inhabitants' spatial intelligence and inventions that are related to it. And 37. So people rescaled their homes for safety reasons and transformed the architectural program of typical modernist dwelling into self-programmed spaces, unique from one another, each containing the resources for specific human lives, as documented in 1994 by architect Zoran Dorschner in his drawings Destructive Metamorphosis, made in 1994, as I said. And these constructions, can you go back?
Yes, you can go back.
So these constructions were made of debris, like irregular forms of concrete, bricks, glass, wood or plastic, or undefined material hybrids. And debris was a medium used by civilians who individually or collectively form a protective power in contrast to the military destructive power. So on the Dorschner drawing, you can also notice like the position of the body that is kind of amphibian. So the small space had to fit many people actually during the war, and you can see like the whole functions of the normal apartment moved to one specific angle. So if you go to the next slide, Claudia, then you can, yeah. He kind of made from the regular 100 square meters apartment, like specific for modernist design and planning, the kind of changed or adapted flat for living during the war. 39. Okay, now I would kind of try to move to the question of survival body. And I argue that personal experiences of war are all unique, let's say, and the human body reacts in different ways to destruction, internal or long distant displacement, noise like military aircraft, sirens, grenades, guns, lack of resources as food, water, electricity, and exposure to the darkness, to extreme heat and cold. All these things like were kind of related. And the obvious way to categorize like survival bodies involved in the war are in two types. So it's a soldier and civilian or citizens. And they both struggle for the survival, but through different power relations. Soldiers against another soldiers and civilian against the soldiers, and the power determined by the weapons that they are carrying. And I decided to include soldiers in survival body analysis because all like war studies and cities are most of the time paying attention to citizens because apparently soldiers are some other superhumans, let's say. And when I saw actually the film of Avi Mograbi, Z32, its name, it's an Israeli filmmaker, and he presented investigation of the way that military dehumanizes both soldiers and the enemy. So by extension, also Israeli society in their war context, let's say. And I also argue that comprehensive analysis of human bodies during war, civilians or soldiers, is never possible because, as I said, like it's about individual experience at the end. And then 40. So people living in a wartime city constantly face fear and uncertainty, and their activities become mostly limited to things like hiding or running. And I kind of learned these things from different documentary films, and I will show one of them partly at the end, a Sarajevo diary from bad to worse, from different photographers' works, as Zoran Kanic, who is kind of a lot in this presentation. I also show one photo from Paul, who will talk to you like on Thursday, and many other also citizens' photos from the war. And we can notice that because of sniper fire, go back. Shelling or warning sirens. Civilians in Sarajevo usually run from place to place, or it's not visible on this photo, but on the others or on film footage, walk with the boat posture or crawled on the ground. And then if people are on the streets during the shelling, in order to hide from the bombs, they would react in relation to their self-trained understanding of the proximity of their bodies to the area where the explosion would occur, let's say. So the sounds of war, like sirens, explosions, and gunfire, are kind of invisible materials that the body absorbs and reacts to, often in an automatic way, out of a newborn survival instinct, let's say. So human body record the sounds of the war, and we learn to recognize the sounds of different weapons, and this kind of stays for a long time in your memory. 41. Now I will try to relate darkness, survival body, with the space and objects during the war, and I think that darkness is also can be perceived as an additional space, and we could think about that space in different scales, as we are used to think about space normally. And in the wartime city, it is lack of the connection with the technology sometimes, and that condition disables human body to do many things that we are familiar with. So you kind of take the natural rhythms of the day. When the darkness comes, certain things you simply don't do. But if we think about Sarajevo and living or walking through the city in the wartime, darkness could partly guarantee survival and safety, let's say. And on this specific quote from the book about Logamino Street, Barbara Demick cried that as darkness descended on Sunday evening, Minka hung a heavy blue wool blanket over her living room window, which faced Mount Trebević. You never wanted any light glinting out to make a target for the gunners in the hills. So this is like her representation of this situation. 42. Darkening of the city is well-known civil tactic that were also used in World War II. For example, to protect cities from the aerial attacks. And this was published in the book about Paris in 2015. Then 44. And also in the encyclopedia of the war years, 40, between 41 45. So about other cities as well. It was always, discourse was about blackout and how this blackout is actually happening. Then next one. So during the Bosnian War, we also went through the same processes of darkening the windows with the curtains, especially at the very beginning of the war. And then as the war was going on, many people covered their windows with sandbags, interior doors, and other objects for safety reasons, and in that way reduce the light in the flat during the day. Next one. These are other sketches also from Zoran Dorschner. So he's representing on these drawings all kind of, how to say, lightening or cooking objects that people were making, as well as transport objects or to carry the water. Next one. And these are drawings from my students from Delft, and they were also kind of, we visited historical museum that has an exhibition about the siege, so they were studying these objects and trying to, how to say, represent how these objects were made. You can move on. One for the electricity making, and then again, these are all related to electricity making. Next one, Claudia. Yeah, bicycle generator. Next one. What was also often featured in the war films as the one Perfect Circle by Ademir Kenovic. So 50. I think that we saw enough of examples and kind of how this urban body or any other resilience can occur, and we can maybe discuss or open some kind of conversation on all these topics, also on non-resilience if you want. And if I come back to the text that I mentioned at the beginning, I kind of in conclusion propose this idea of developing patterns of urban resilience. And it was based on the work of Christopher Alexander and his book Pattern Language, and also other authors. And assuming that the pattern of urban resilience is a combination of the creative and innovative spatial practices found in everyday life, social rules and values, and thoughts on disaster risks in urban environments. And in this book, Pattern pattern language, patterns are presented as entities that create elements of this language. So each pattern describes a problem which occurs over and over again in our environment. And no pattern is actually an isolated entity. And individual patterns could be seen as a relation between problem and solution, but in a very general and abstract way, let's say, so that you can solve the problem for yourself in your own way by adapting to your own preferences and the local conditions as the place where you are making it. But I think in Sarajevo case, I would add that making a pattern in your own way was also based on the needs for everyday life and living in such extreme conditions, and not only to adapt yourself to your own preferences. 51. And also, based on the Sarajevo example, it's possible to conclude that it is difficult to plan a definitive urban resilience system, because so much of the resilience required appeared as survival instinct from within the Sarajevo population, and maybe a city could be prepared for the worst case scenarios, but really not planned. And this is also what Elke and Maike, if you ever read their text, are kind of discussing. They are moving from system of resilience to resilient subjects as more relevant or more credible in some kind of moment of some disaster. And also, I think that reaction and behavior of citizens once disaster happened cannot be planned. And on the next slide, Claudia, should be the video, but I'm not sure if it's working from here. Maybe you can play it. We can try.
I walked into the kitchen. That moment, it whizzed past me, and this tiny little hole, which I'm using for my bell now. We followed the rest of the fit there, and made a hole in the door. Maybe if the neighbour is in, you'll see where it ended. We couldn't get it out. It's niet met televisie. Oh, it's English.
Stop here.
It ended here, and it's too deep in. I think.
Okay, so this was actually a woman from the footage of Dom Rothero and William Tribe, who also who passed away some years ago. And she actually, they were filming her a lot, and she was living all the time. And she was in Sarajevo during the war in her flat on 12th floor, I think. And she would always adapt as war was getting further. She would move from one space to another, and kind of make her flat, let's say, resilient and herself. But and also the bell that you saw was made from the bullet. Yeah. And I would finish here if there are any questions or.
Well, Armina, thank you so much. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry guys, we're so tense over here in Sarajevo. I don't know, Armina. I think next time we will bring some wine to when we do these lectures on Zoom. Thank you so much, Armina, for the presentation. It was amazing. And thank you all the people that are following us tonight. Sorry for the technical problems we had with audio as well. I'm so sorry.
But perhaps you can forgive us because it's our first.
Yeah, it's really first
Zoom,
time Kuma on Zoom, and we still have 7 lectures by the end of the month, so we will
be pros.
We will be pros by the end of October. But Armina, thank you so much.
You are welcome, and I'm sorry for the.
No,
we had some noise on this side, and.
No worries at all. Maybe there are some questions from the audience.
At this point, we should open up. The floor to audience. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to either speak up or type it into the comments if you prefer that we read it.
You can either send us a message in the chat or just speak up. Now it's possible to turn your audio on. Yeah. Maybe
anyone? Okay. So if there are no questions, maybe I can ask.
Yes. Yeah, thanks.
So you've been obviously working with the war thematic for quite some time, from what I understand, for most of your academic career. And at what point have you changed to this kind of bodily perspective, and where does the landscape come into play? I mean, you obviously talked about the geography of war and all that, but I know that now you're teaching at a landscape architecture department. And so how do you merge these two conditions, and how do you perhaps address that right now in your current work, and how has that shifted your architectural approach? Your audio is off.
I can unmute myself. So I think it was gradually. So I did start from architectural perspective, and then as I was studying, I was doing my PhD, I realized that there is no much to learn from. I mean, there is no many documents done. It's very limited. It's more photography, video, films, this material, journal articles. They were more descriptive, let's say, and more. Thanks to Zoran Dorschner, there is some kind of trace to think in this way, and there are also some other ideas, but not so accurate as he did it, like really. And I did also many interviews with him, and then somehow already in that time I learned how to cross-reference. I mean, our discipline with other disciplines, let's say, and then moving to landscape was kind of very, very natural, because I started to investigate Mostar during the war 2 years ago, and it's a completely different story, and it's all around landscape. There are also these same images that you saw about Sarajevo, very, very, very similar. I mean, just different streets, but the sniper protection walls are there, you know, all this urban gardening. But then the Neretva is actually at the center of the conflict, and even today, like all traumatic events are related to the river, actually. That's how I started to teach as well, studio that has to do with landscape during the war, and then, you know, like new how to say, not ideas, but new data and new resources came into place, and I think it's more integral. I mean, I feel like that it's more interesting even now, because it's different. You're asking nature what happened, and the consequences after the war that we have now are more visible actually in the nature because of mine pollution, all kind of weapons that were deposited in the forests, in the rivers. Neretva is full of. We also did underwater filming of the river, and it's full of weapons, like bullets and all kind of debris from the war. And maybe some other time we do also this presentation. But yeah, anyway, it's yeah. And also when you walk in the forests, on the mountains, like Prejn, for example, it's quite high. You have still mined areas or trees completely destroyed you can see from the grenades or from the battles. You also find a lot of. I saw it myself. I'm a hiker. When I'm in Bosnia, I always go to some mountains. So in Trebević there is a lot. So yeah, I think nature was really suffering from war as the cities did. Yeah.
Moving more into this photography. This project Neretva, what stage is it at? And is this
I don't hear you.
The project about Neretva, is this an ongoing research project? Is something?
Yes, we have to do still a lot. Yeah, we stop a little bit now, but yeah.
Are we going to get a chance to see it in Sarajevo?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I did exhibit it, and I also kind of show this work quite a lot around, but not still in Bosnia. So I have to.
Is it Kosovo Binale or
Yeah, in Kosovo, I was talking about archiving during the war, different topic, but still related, let's say. Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to invite you back then so that you can tell us more about so,
yeah.
But I mean, if there are no more questions from the audience, considering that we had a bit of a delay in start.
No, I also apologize. The how to say it was not really flow, but it was like in the war, you know.
Yes.
unpredictable.
And the internet connection stayed with us the whole time. You know, I was actually wanted to ask you like a very quick question about.
Yeah, go ahead. I have time. Don't worry.
Thank you. About the recent lockdown in spring, because you weren't in Sarajevo, and then I wanted to ask you how the pandemic impacted your research, since you weren't able to come to Sarajevo to research the archive. And then you were saying how nature was damaged during the war, of course, and how much nature was suffering during the war. And then we were seeing, at least at the beginning of lockdown, that nature was doing much better than humans at some point.
Yeah.
And you also
during the lockdown, we actually did 2 projects digitally. So we did research from our computers, and it was quite challenging. And this was done in one in Lithuania about militarizing landscapes. So it was about all military bases since Soviet period until now, because in Lithuania it became very big business. There are training camps everywhere, and it's kind of part of entertainment, part of like military trainings for NATO forces coming from everywhere, like US, Germany, Italy, I don't know. So they are cutting woods there to kind of make possible these exercises. So yeah, we did like a lot of GIS mapping and Google and archival footage again. And we had some friends in Lithuania to help us with the documents translating, and we invented some like also stories about some plants. It was also landscape research more than architecture. So yeah, that one, and also the other one was an exhibition about recent projects on migrating landscapes, and that one we also finished online. It was interesting because probably we would never do it that way. So there is always a way. It's more difficult, but yeah, there is always a way to do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you again to everyone for being with us, and sorry for the delay once again. Thank you for being patient, and thank you so very much.
And we hope to see everyone again on Thursday, and we promise that we'll try at least to run things.
Yeah, it's going to be better and better by the end of the month. So thank you so much, everyone. And again, reach out to us on with the social media or email. You will find all contacts on the Kuma International website. And thank you so much.
And see you Thursday.
And see you on Thursday.
With Paul.
Yes, with Paul Love. Okay. Thank you.